Welcome back to Tiny Blue Games. My name's of course Csaw or Chris, and today we're talking about Guild Wars 2 in 2023. Specifically, we're going to be talking about the newest Fractal to be added to the game, Silent Surf. And yes, I know there's a lot of other really exciting things we should be talking about Guild Wars 2-wise, specifically about the new expansion, and we will get into that in a future video, but I wanted to tackle the Fractal as it is something that is currently in the game and playable right now, and we do still have a little bit of time to chat more about the expansion before it goes live. That all said, I should mention I am a Guild Wars 2 or ArenaNet partner. Does this mean I won't say anything bad about Guild Wars 2? No, I'll say the good, I'll say the bad, I'll say the medium, but it does mean you'll find 2 sponsored or referral links in the comment section below. If you use one of these links to make a free account, it supports the channel, and if you use the other one to purchase the expansions, it also helps support the channel. With that said though, let's get into the video. So this Fractal kind of came out of nowhere for me. I did know there was a new Fractal coming eventually, and then it just kind of was here, which is actually a lot of how I play Guild Wars 2 now, is I don't really follow along the day-to-day, and then I just arrive when the content's there, and it's actually been kind of one of the most exciting ways to play the game, because I just log in and I'm like, oh, there's new content for me to try. So that said, I got into the game and went and found out about the new Fractal. And that's when I first realized that I hadn't been playing enough Guild Wars 2, because I was like, oh, I wonder where in the map I'll enter the Fractal, and of course, it's in the main city through the big Fractal thing like you always do, so silly me. But I went there, and the new Fractal is set as the hardest difficulties, and I think this is the case for every new Fractal that comes in. It gets set to the 100, 75, 50, and 25 difficulties, and then I had to go about trying to find a group for this. Now, the challenging thing about this is that Guild Wars 2 has a system that has kind of 3 Fractals that are the dailies of the day, and pretty much, unless you're playing on the first couple days of release for this Fractal, it's going to be relatively hard to just stumble into a group that's doing it. Pretty much everyone who's a dedicated Fractal player will be doing the daily content. You might see some people who are just trying to go up through the Fractals as kind of like their first time through, and you could, tag along and eventually end up there, but I wanted to just jump into this run. So I started trying to advertise a group as a blind run of the Silent Surf Fractal. I did this at the highest level because I do have full AR on my character. However, I did not get any bites. Apparently no one at that level wanted to join someone who was just doing a blind run for fun, believe it or not. So I brought things down to the 50 mark, at which point I did get some people to join in, and we dove into the Fractal. The Fractal itself, if you've played any of the most recent maps and have seen the color green, you've probably seen a lot of the atmosphere. And to be fair, it is very on theme with what it's about. It's about the Jade Sea and stuff like that, and it looks really nice. It's just we've seen a lot of Jade Green in the last few, and I think they try to do this. They try to make you absolutely sick of the most recent expansions, so the new expansion feels so good once you get there. I don't know if that's actually a game dev tactic, but it kind of feels that way sometimes. That said, the actual Fractal plays a lot differently than most of the Fractals I've been in, I think, ever. This one, for the first 90% of it, is mostly about traversing, different types of spaces. And you're given a completely separate toolkit to do this. You have kind of a few different things at your disposal. You have a parachute, you have a rope of some sort that you can kind of swing from things. A grapple would be the correct term for it. You've got this bomb that pushes you forward a few times, and then you do have a flare that you can put down as well. And with this kit, you're going to be jumping between platform to platform, riding on a few different devices to get around, and ultimately just deeper into the Fractal. Now, this sounds really easy, but it's actually pretty difficult the first time through until you get a good feel of how things work. For instance, it's not like you can just, hit the parachute button and for sure launch your parachute. You have to do it not too early and not too late to actually land successfully with the parachute. And if you do not stick the landing, or at least aren't close to sticking the landing, you won't just die on the ground for people to res you. You will be brought back to where you started, which kind of sounds like a nice thing until you realize that some of these sort of episodes of jumping are quite a few jumps that you need to make in a row, and it's pretty frustrating when you get pulled back. Now, if you're someone who is horrible at jumping and have now been scared off from the Fractal, do not worry. There is a mechanic where I think it's either 2 or 3 people get to the next point. They stand on this circle and it activates kind of a teleporter that I think brings the rest of the group through. So they have thought this through because obviously not everyone's going to be good at doing this jumping activity. And this way, at least if you have a few people make it through, you can bring the rest along with you. So while doing this, you will eventually encounter some mobs that will attack you kind of as a wave of creatures. It's pretty easy to deal with. Like, none of these groups on level 50 were at all challenging, and I kind of wouldn't expect it to be, but just wait till we get to the last boss. They were pretty easy to go down to finish them. I will say that we're probably not in a very well optimized group. This is a group of people who were just, brought in by my blind fun run post. So you're gonna have a larger amount of people who are just newer to the game and probably not as optimized. And saying that, this is a character that's frozen in time from 3 years ago that I'm playing on. So yeah, I might not be very optimized either, but at least I do have agony resistance, so that's something. So you go through a few of these different checkpoints and clear the waves, and eventually you get to one where there is a mini boss that spawns. The mini boss has more health. It's still not a scary fight, but it does teach you about 2 of the mechanics that you are going to witness on the last boss. Having gone through the last boss a few times now and seeing these mechanics, I can tell you them in greater detail. The first of them that I understood from the very second it happened is a look away mechanic. There's a big eye that goes above the head of the boss. You'll look away until it goes away, and there'll be kind of a sound cue of when it explodes, and then you go back to it. The actual detonation of it puts a fear on you, it triggers agony, but it's honestly not like a one-shot or something like that, so it's not the end of the world, but it is certainly on this first boss very easy to dodge because there's just the one eye to avoid. The other mechanic is more unique in the sense that everyone in your party will get kind of a circle put around them, which looks like you need the spread, and you do. But in addition to that, you get a Roman numeral above your head. And based on this numeral, the boss is going to attack people in your party. And, if you're number 1, you're going to get attacked first. If you're number 5, you're going to get attacked last, which is kind of nice because you can time either dodges or defensives that go on right when you're get attacked. This is, once again, another mechanic that will happen during the boss fight and is quite deadly if not done properly. So it is something to learn. It's something that, is really cool because it works on timing for players and then also positioning. It's kind of got 2 different effects to it. Either way, you kill this mini boss and then you drop down, at which point you find the person who's been leading us through this mission is dead because, of course, they're dead. It's a Fractal. And we go against the last boss. Now, this is where I'm going to do the most amount of talking, I think, because, yeah, this took a lot longer than I thought. Like I say, up to this point, this Fractal felt like it was a level 50 Fractal that I was really overgeared for. I was not concerned very often. Some things took a little bit longer to kill because of the group I had, or because of my damage. I shouldn't shift blame. It's probably on myself as much as anyone else. But there was no point during this that we were at all scared for our lives. This boss, completely flipped that. Just was super difficult at level 50. And there's probably people who have very optimized groups who've gone through this boss a few times and are like, nah, it's nothing. But relative to other Fractals at level 50 or nearer, or at least in this tier, it is night and day, in my opinion. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I certainly think the level 100 version of this should be really hard. I think this one was maybe a little bit too tough because, as you'll see at the very end of the video, I ended up going into a level 25 version to actually complete this fight, and it was still pretty tough. So the things that happen during this fight, there's kind of 3 phases with a phase switch at 66 and I believe 33 would make sense. The first phase is incredibly easy. There's, very little chance of anyone dying during it unless they are super, don't have AR. And even then, some of the party members I don't think had a ton of AR, and they still survived pretty easily through the first phase. The only mechanic you're going to be dealing with is the look away mechanic of the eye. It goes on top of the boss, but it also goes on these ads around the room. So the added difficulty here is that not only do you just have to not face the center or wherever the boss is, but also not be facing any of the ads. And if you can do that every so often, you're absolutely fine. Just burn the boss. The boss does have a significant amount of health. Like I say, we took a while to kill it in both groups I did it on, so I just don't know if it's, super tanky or what the deal is, but it did take a while to kill. The intermission phase is, I would say, what was most confusing to me the first time I did it, and I definitely did not understand it until many, many times through. Essentially, you have a situation where the boss goes to the center and there's kind of this expanding circle of doom. It feels very much like the Gorseval fight, where you have to eventually break through the wall to kind of escape the circle of doom or die. And it's just slowly expanding. And the first time I did it, I had no idea how to counteract it. I was looking around, I looked at my tool belt to see if there was some kind of thing I could do with it, which there is. I just didn't put it together. But what I ended up doing is just waiting until the end and tried rolling. And you can actually dodge roll and, completely dodge the attack. So keep that in mind. If things fail, that is something to do. And I think pretty much no matter what, it's a good option to try and roll at the end of it to try and avoid all damage. The attack itself doesn't necessarily do lethal damage, but its damage scales, I believe, off of the amount of ads you have up, which in turn, I believe, is related to if you fail at breaking the boss's break bar. So it can vary depending on how good your group is at breaking break bars. Don't take that word for sacred information. Go watch your Get to the Point guide from Muckluck or whatever. But I believe that's the case. So if you had all of them up, all of the ads, and you just took it without any defensives or anything, yeah, there's a good chance your group could die, especially as we get to the second version of this phase shift is a lot more difficult in my opinion. What you're supposed to do if you're doing this properly, and I still have never actually successfully done it properly, is during the intermission, the ads around the boss will target people with kind of an arrow looking attack. If you have the arrow shooting at you and you run to the ad will jump back and go onto one of the platforms surrounding the circle, which for some reason I just did not understand or see during the initial runs of this. What you're supposed to do then, if you're the player who did make the ad move, you can see which platform this ad goes to. I think you're the only one who sees the ad go to a platform. You can go to that platform using your grapple, kill the ad, and that is one less ad that's up for the actual damage to come out. One very important thing to note is that you will still be hit by the, radius damage even if you're on the platforms. Because what the most obvious mechanic when you're just kind of looking at the lookout here is that it's similar to Gorseval, and all you have to do to avoid it is use your grapple over to the ledge and go back. And I think that would have made a lot more sense. I don't know still why I didn't, try that right away. But the mechanic they have currently is very difficult to understand without doing it a bunch or reading a guide or something like that. Comparatively to both the eye mechanic, where it's obvious you look away, or even the kind of telegraphed, he's going to charge at you a few times mechanic. This one was pretty confusing. Anywho, you made it through the 66%, you're into the second phase. And now the second and third phase is where things got really, really difficult for both groups I went in. We very clearly had some people who did not have full agony resistance, and because of that, we were rezzing people pretty much all of the time. Despite that though, even, myself, I would find portions of it very difficult to survive if I wasn't kind of paying attention the whole time. And to be fair, you should probably be paying attention in most fights you do, but like I say, I am pretty overgeared in terms of agony resistance, and typically that means in other fractals, I don't necessarily need to pay attention too much. This one was definitely you know, we're trying to survive the whole time and do as much damage as we can the whole time. The big things that shift here is that there is kind of a swirly blade, I believe, that like eventually goes down. You want to like get out of it. And I think that just ramps more and more as you go into the fight. So something to keep in mind. And then just things do a lot more damage and more frequently, it feels like. So you're just going through it, you're trying to stay alive, and then you get to another phase shift at 33%. Once again, try and find your weird ad that's targeting you and then go and try and kill it, and or just ignore all of that and just really time a good dodge roll and you're on to the next phase. This one's very similar to the second one in my opinion. Very difficult still. I think the attacks just happen more frequently. There is kind of a final phase, I think, at 10%, or at least it seemed like it, where something was happening, but we tunnel vision the boss at that point. I was like, no, I'm not going. At this point, I had tried to kill this boss, I think 3 or 4 times, and this final kill that you're watching here is at the 25 level. And even then, we were still like probably like 6 or 7, maybe even 8 minutes into the fight. And yeah, I was not ready to do this again. So I was tunnel vision killing the boss, and we did end up getting it, which was great. But yeah, that was the Fractal. Overall, I think really fun. I think if you're someone who is treating fractals like dungeons, you'd be kind of disappointed because it plays more like a jumping puzzle with a one boss fight. Versus if you look at some of the past fractals or even the actual old dungeons in the game that have multiple encounters and like a lot more to kind of sink your teeth into, this one feels kind of like a jumping puzzle mixed with a strike mission, which, you know, is different. And I will say the boss fight was something to sink your teeth in. I can't imagine what that's like at level 100. But yeah, there it is. Let me know what you guys think. Have you tried the new Fractal? Let me know in the comments below. But otherwise, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks. Bye.